Hi, everyone. I'm Erin Smith, the Marketing and Communications Coordinator here at the Japanese American Museum of Oregon, coming to you from our archives room to talk about our 25th anniversary digital exhibition, 25 for 25, which showcases 25 objects from our collection and the unique stories that they tell. Later on, I'll bring on Connie Masuoka, the president of our board, to talk with me about one particular object and a little bit about the history of the collection. 2023 marks 25 years of the Japanese American Museum of Oregon and the museum's collection. As many of you, I'm sure, know, a lot of the Japanese American museums, cultural sites, the memorials, sites of remembrance, most of those are grassroots organizations that were started by the community, and they house objects, archives, and oral histories collected from those communities, often established after years, maybe decades of organizing and labor. So it's really important to recognize these milestones when they come up, to acknowledge not only the history, but also all of the people who have come before us and built these organizations that make it possible to preserve, share, and honor this history today. Our digital exhibition celebrates that milestone by focusing on 25 unique and defining objects from our collection. But first, I do want to talk a little bit about why this collection exists, because there was never any guarantee that Oregon's Japanese American community would have a museum of its own. Here's George Katagiri. And in fact, 30 years ago, George Katagiri was working on the first ever museum exhibition dedicated to Oregon's Nikkei. And while he was working on that, he actually worried he wouldn't be able to find enough objects to tell the story. At the time, we're talking the 90s, the Japanese American Historical Plaza had just been dedicated in 1990, and that was a huge accomplishment of the Oregon and Portland community. There was a coordinated effort underway in general during that time to tell the Japanese American story, especially the World War II incarceration story, a sense that it really needed to be told, that the knowledge from older generations may be lost, and that the public really needed to be educated on what had happened. The Japanese American National Museum, in collaboration with the Oregon Historical Society, was putting together this exhibition on Oregon's East Bay, and George Katagiri was the local organizer and researcher. He wrote in the introduction to the catalog, "At first, it seemed as though the project would be almost impossible to complete successfully. We felt that exhibit items, photographs, and documents would be difficult to find. The most almost universal response from potential donors was, 'I'm sorry, but we don't have anything of importance.' But luckily, George and the other team members were able to convince people to share their precious family keepsakes, and often to just be borrowed, scanned, and returned, or the objects were borrowed just for the exhibition and returned afterwards. So here's George talking about that experience.
I traveled all over the state picking up artifacts. We went through the Yasui barn with Homer and looked at all the artifacts that his dad had saved. And then we went up into other farms and picked up the mochi usu and the kine, they used to pound mochi in, and we brought those back. But they had screens that their fathers had made in the camps, and they're loaning all of these things to us. So it was, I became interested in the year at the year's end of about the East Bay of Oregon, and was building up my knowledge of what happened among the East Bays.
In this great land of freedom, the Japanese Pioneers of Oregon opened in 1993 at the Oregon Historical Society, and it was a great success, so much so that it also traveled around the state. Now, in that clip, you notice he talked about the knowledge, the historic knowledge that was gained. There was a lot of skill building that also happened. But there was one more realization that this process brought about. And here's another clip of George talking about it.
And one thing became apparent. Here, it's in the 90s. Most of these, or many of them, are no longer living, and they were the few remaining were dying, and then we found out that the Nisei, were taking their diaries and throwing them away because they couldn't read them, and a lot of the documents were being destroyed. And we thought, oh my gosh, we need to put a stop to this. And so the concept of a legacy center began to develop. And it was very clear that we needed a place where we can collect these things before they all disappeared.
So you can see the impact that this exhibition on the Issei or first generation Japanese Americans had. The Oregon Nikkei Legacy Center was founded 5 years later in 1998, which eventually became the Japanese American Museum of Oregon. Fast forward to today, and the museum hosts the largest repository of Oregon's Nikkei history with thousands of photographs, letters, documents, and objects in our archives. And the community continues to add to the collection, um, helping to further expand what we know, the depth and richness of the Japanese American story in Oregon. And here, even you can see some of these objects, the carved animals, are from the Ochita collection, which was just donated last year and processed throughout this year. And we'll be talking a little bit more about that later on. I do want to get on to our digital exhibition. So this exhibit began in the spring of 2023. It's when we added our first objects, and we'll continuously add more items until there's 25 up through the spring of 2024. So each month we add more objects and more stories. Some are chosen by the staff, but others are chosen by people who have worked closely with a collection at one time or another, like June Schumann, who is the executive director, Betty Jean Harry, a longtime volunteer, Lynn Fujigami Parks, also the executive director, and who's still involved in the museum, and Connie Masuoka, who I'm going to bring on now. So I'm here with Connie Masuoka, the president of our board of directors at the Japanese American Museum of Oregon. And we're here to talk about one of the objects in our digital exhibit. It's an important object actually from the museum's history as well. So Connie, can you tell us what is this?
This is a drum, a kodaiko, a small taiko drum. And it's probably one of the first acquisitions that we got. And it has really sweet kind of serendipitous story that goes with it. When we first opened the museum, a family came in, a non-Japanese family came in and said, "We found this." As we were remodeling our house, it was stuck up in the rafters. And we think it's Japanese and we'd like to know more about it. And maybe we could give it to you. And that was really nice. And then we saw that there was writing on the side, and actually readable writing, so which is not always the case. And we were able to, and easily readable. So we found out that it was a community member that we knew very well, Dr. Jim Katsumi Nakadate. And it turns out that this was given to him as a kind of honoring of his birth. So this was given to him in, I think the date on this is 1916. He was born in 1914, but it was kind of like a birthday present that was given to him. He thinks, because we were able to actually bring Dr. Nakadate in to confirm this gift, confirm this drum that it was his. And he looked at it and he said, "Yeah, that's mine. Yeah, I don't know where it went, but yeah, that's my name. I remember I had a drum like that." And so this is one of our first pieces that really ties us to Portland, that we have a history, and there's an actual piece of people who lived here and things that they had. Yeah.
did it sort of reaffirm what like the purpose of what you were trying to do with the Legacy
Yeah,
Center?
to tell the
have something like
stories, to
that?
tell the history, to connect us, to ground us to Portland. I mean, to ground us to the area that we're not visitors.
Mhm.
We're not, people who are wandering through. We were actually people who were founders of Portland. We had something to do with the founding of Portland. That we were a well-established community in when Doc was born, 1914. There were already well-established families in Portland. I think we can actually date most of our first families coming in the 1800s. The
Mhm.
first Mia Yokoshi came in 1867, I believe.
Well, thank you so much, Connie, for joining us and telling about the drum and remembering back in the days of founding the Legacy Center. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so another really important object from the early days of the collection is this hand-painted kimono. It was crafted in 1931 for Fumi Sakano's um, to wear in the Rose Festival parade. So in that time, the Japanese and Japanese American community in Portland had their own float in the Rose Festival parade every year, and they selected their own um, community queen, and then they also had a whole community court as well. So in that year, and it was voted on. So Fumie was selected as the queen for the Japanese community float in 1931, and this kimono was made specifically for her for this occasion. So this is silk hand painted with chrysanthemums on the front, and then on the back, we have more of the flowers and then the small crest on the back. So here's a picture of her wearing the kimono. She's also wearing, you can see, a tiara, and that tiara is on display at the Japanese American Museum of Oregon in our permanent exhibition. So you can come anytime and see her tiara. Um, and then in the photo to the right, you can see the whole court and these gentlemen standing in front of the community float for the parade. So the accession number for this object is 1998.01.01. So you notice 1998, that's the year that came to the museum. 01, that means it's the first group of objects in that year to be brought into the collection. And then the last one signifies that it's the first item in that grouping to be entered into the collection. So that means, therefore, this kimono is actually the very first object in the collection of the Japanese American Museum of Oregon in the year of its founding. So it is quite special. It's very fitting. This is a symbol of community and belonging, crafted during a time when Portland's Nihonmachi, or Japantown, was well established and thriving. So it's a very fitting item to be the first object in the collection. Another object that's featured in our digital exhibition is this carved rooster, made sometime between 1942 and 1945 at the Minidoka concentration camp by Shigeru Ochida. This donation came to us from the Ochida family, from Rita and Hideo. Hideo was in Minidoka with his family, his parents, and his siblings. And as you can see, his father got really into um, crafting things out of wood, carving these animals, as you saw in the video earlier when I took you down the aisle in the archives. Those were some more of the animals that his father had carved. His mother was more into the jewelry making, so this is also part of that same donation. she was really into making the shell brooches that we've also seen, I'm sure, at other concentration camps and other incarceries at Minidoka as well. And so you notice some of these things, like there's similarities in styles or in forms, and that's because people taught each other their skills. Someone might have an idea, find some of these natural materials and have an idea of something to do with them. It would get shared around. People would share their skills. Some people came to camps with great artistic skill, some with none or very little or just amateur skills, but it doesn't matter. They all um, found, meaning or purpose or just deliverance from boredom in engaging in these crafts. And in this case, what's amazing about one of the most amazing things about this donation, obviously the craftsmanship is lovely, but also that they donated and still had all of this raw material. So all of these jars of shells that were collected, the templates that were made to create some of those wooden carvings and also some of the brooches. All right, one last object. This is a special preview for something that we haven't put up yet, and in fact haven't even really written about yet or done research. So this is brand new. This stuffed tortoise came to us from Janie Matsushima. It was donated just at the end of last year and came with some other objects that she donated, but and the information that she had was that it came from Japan in 1905. It was an object that people would hang in their store or wherever their business is for good luck. And it was at the supposedly on display at the Teikoku store, which was one of the businesses in Portland's Nihon Machi before World War II. After World War II, it was reestablished as Onsen, a legendary local Asian and Japanese store here in Portland. And Janie remembered when she had been helping out at the store around 2003, she remembered this hanging in the kitchen there. So stay tuned. We'll be writing more about this in the next coming months and give you some more information. But that's all I've got for now. And uh, thank you so much for joining me for this brief tour. There are, of course, more objects up right now that I did not go over in this presentation. You can visit the website at jamo.org/25-objects. Please feel free to use this QR code to access that link. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at JamoPDX and follow us there to see when we post more objects like these and more items from our archives. Thank you for joining me today.